Our next speaker joined TS Point Loma in 2006. He is now, like almost every other speaker these days, doing multiple things, one of which is he's a course leader, he's a speaker, he's a study leader, and since he works in educational technology, he's also our webmaster. And for organizing these ITCs, of course, we need him to make registrations, to put things on the web, so he's a very essential part of everything we do here. And he's also a member of the board of ITC. His name is Erwin Bomas.
And he's already standing up here, doing his own slides. Okay, good afternoon. About the nature of truth and how to grasp the essence of her timeless message of HPB. Well, just as it requires effort and insight to understand who HPB or H.P. Blavatsky really was, like we already heard this morning, so her message also can only be understood if the receiver of the message is ready for it. I think it is impossible just to read her writings superficially if you want to make any sense out of it. Her writings always make you, as a reader, turn inwards. And that's exactly what their purpose is. To make you resonate with the higher, more noble, and eventually even the divine part in yourself. And in short, that is the answer, I think, to how to grasp the essence of her message. To find the Theosophy that resides in your heart. So in this presentation, I will try to give you an overview of her message, what can be regarded as the essence therefrom, and I will elaborate on the way to grasp her message. And when mentioning her message and H.P. Blavatsky, I refer to HPB and also what she stood for, as was already presented this morning by in the lecture of Barend and others. So you can barely oversee the entire writings of H.P. Blavatsky, I think, in one incarnation. And grasping the whole of it requires probably many more. So any overview would dwarf it, especially one in a few minutes. So just as a way to overview her message, you could say that she presents the answers to three of the most important questions of life any human being could ask himself. Namely, who am I? Where do I come from? And thirdly, why am I here? In the sense of what is the purpose of my life? And her answers to those questions can all be found in the three fundamental propositions of the secret doctrine, that together also form the, you might say, essence of her message, of which she writes herself, that it is absolutely necessary that he, meaning the reader, should be made acquainted with the few fundamental conceptions which underlie and pervade the entire system of thought to which his attention is invited. These basic ideas are few in number, and on their clear apprehension depends the understanding of all that follows. And like Jacques already mentioned, we probably already know them by heart, so I won't read them aloud. But the first fundamental proposition, in short you could say the boundless or boundlessness, does present us indeed I think the most fundamental answer to the question of who we are. Because first, boundlessness implies that we are part of it, since nothing can be excluded from the boundless. And next, it also implies that we potentially have boundless capabilities, since a part of the boundless must contain everything within the boundless itself. The part cannot miss anything or contain something that is not in the boundless. Otherwise, the boundless wouldn't be boundless. But the most fundamental implication is that we are the boundless in essence. We are in the heart of our being, the one reality itself. And therefore we are in essence one with all beings, or rather with all being. And that also partly answers the second question. So where do we come from? Well, being the boundless in essence, we have always been there, and we will always be there. Essentially, we did not start coming from somewhere, and we will not end at some destination either. and this applies to all beings. However, we perceive otherwise, don't we? We see things come and go all the time. So there the second fundamental proposition comes in, explaining the cyclical manifestation of all beings. We are one of the incessantly manifesting and disappearing stars or sparks of eternity, eternal in essence, but transitory in each one of our infinite number of manifestations. Then the third question comes naturally, why? Why are we here? Manifesting at this point in time and space, in this body, with this character, under these circumstances, etc. And in the third fundamental proposition, this question is answered by the obligatory pilgrimage for every soul, in accordance with cyclic and karmic law. A pilgrimage of progressive evolution of consciousness that is identical for all souls, as above, so below, and which has to be gone through by self-induced and self-devised efforts, already mentioned before. So these three fundamental propositions present together the what, the why, and the how of life. Now, reading these fundamental propositions for the first time, they might sound somewhat abstract, somewhat theoretical and unpractical. However, their practical application is universal. Together they point to the fundamental unity of all that exists. And this core idea of unity provides the ethical and logical basis for the main ideal of the TS, realizing universal brotherhood. According to the fundamental propositions, universal brotherhood is, of course, not a nice sentiment just for dreamers, but simply a fact in nature. And realizing the essential unity of all that is makes one naturally practice compassion and follow the bodhisattva ideal, giving up oneself for the benefit of all beings. So the three fundamental propositions are further elaborated in teachings such as reincarnation, karma, and the hierarchical structure of the cosmos, in which everything exists within everything else. And together they form the basis to find a solution to every problem in life. If we would live by the idea of the unity of all life, for instance, would there be a climate problem? And if reincarnation and karma were really lived by, would we still think that any form of violence is a solution? However, all theosophical teachings must always be seen in the light of the three fundamentals, which also serve as, you might say, touchstones to test their value and application. For example, if karma is not seen in the light of unity, it can quickly degenerate to the thought of, you get what you deserve, instead of seeing all karma as, in essential, our karma. So according to H.P. Blavatsky, the fundamental unity of all existence is the idea which must be held always in the background of the mind to form the basis for every conception that arises from study of the secret doctrine. So we must see really all teachings in the light of this idea, this unity. And she writes in the Key to Theosophy how her message applies to the practical brotherhood of men. And then she compares mankind to one body, of which injuring one single part influences the whole body. A very clear image, especially for one like me that once got a cut in the finger and almost fainted because of that. And you have to really watch out with these old Amsterdam cheeses. I'm warning also the foreigners here. So, but sadly, I must note, watching the news these days, that this body of mankind of ours is not just annoyed by one little cut in the finger. Other than answers to the most fundamental questions in life, a shorter way of representing the core of Blavatsky's message is simply by stating that she was a signpost for the road to truth. She was a messenger of the Theosophy, which is synonym to truth, as she also writes herself, as we have seen in the part of the Key to Theosophy yesterday, and which was also in the paragraph we studied last year from the Mahachohan. But by Theosophia that can be regarded as truth is not meant Theosophy as handed down to us in the form of teachings and writings, because the divine wisdom cannot be put into words. And as Blavatsky supposedly said herself about the secret doctrine, that it is not meant to give any such final verdict on existence, but to lead towards the truth. However, when we surpass the illusion of form, the heart of the message, its ultimate source, the heart of the message, its ultimate source, is of course the divine truth itself. But before we can answer how you can know if her message is true and how to grasp that, we first have to explain, I think, how truth is seen from the theosophical perspective. Because that is one of the, I think, very philosophically elegant aspects of the first fundamental proposition, stating that there is one reality anteceding all manifestation. It makes clear that there is one truth throughout, a truth that is eternal. And what is true now has been true always and will always be true. A truth that is omnipresent and universal, that it always applies to everything, so that there cannot be any situation that is in contrast with it. And also a truth that is boundless, so it's never possible to grasp it in its fullness by any manifested and thus limited being. So this prevents any form of dogmatizing and always leaves the way open to grasp more of the truth. So as the truth is boundless, there is no individual manifested being, not even the highest Dianchoan or God, that is able to grasp the total truth. All manifested beings can only perceive their part of the truth that is always relative. But these relative truths are complementary. And we see that all can add to the understanding of the truth, like in the famous similitude, you call it, of the blind monks. You probably all know it, where each of the monks, holding a part of the elephant, could build up a more complete image if they would work together, rather than each working separately based on a piece of the truth. And isn't that what we're doing here at ITC? According to the first fundamental proposition, the one reality or one absolute truth antecedes all manifestation. So all things perceived by us, including ourselves as manifested beings, are in a sense illusory. That does not mean that they do not exist, but that the essence of their existence escapes our perception, however real their phenomena are to us. In philosophy, it is called objective idealism, and it is associated with Plato and later the German philosopher von Schelling. And Blavatsky presents us the following example. She says, to the untrained eye of the savage, a painting is at first an unmeaning confusion of streaks and daubs of color, while an educated eye sees instantly a face or a landscape. So, and she continues, nothing is permanent except the one hidden absolute existence which contains in itself the noumena of all realities. But she also shows a way out. She says, Maya or illusion is an element which enters into all finite things. For everything that exists has only a relative, not an absolute reality, since the appearance which the hidden noumenon assumes for any observer depends upon his power of cognition. So there's a very important key here. Another famous example of this from the old Vedas is someone perceiving a piece of rope in the dark as a snake. And the first reaction of fear is as big as if there really was a snake. So the world of Maya or illusion is as real as long as the perceiving consciousness identifies with it, as long as the cognizing consciousness has not yet discerned what is illusion from what is reality. And Blavatsky adds, as we rise in our process of development, we perceive that during the stages through which we have passed, we mistook shadows for realities. And the upward progress of the ego is a series of progressive awakenings, each advance bringing with it the idea that now, at last, we have reached reality. But only when we shall have reached the absolute consciousness and blended our own with it, shall we be free from the delusions produced by Maya. So here we have really the key to how to grasp her message, the unity of all that is. We must identify with the whole, with the apex of the hierarchy we are part of, with the absolute consciousness. So in the words of HPB again, for the essence of Theosophy is the perfect harmonizing of the divine with the human in man, the adjustment of his godlike qualities and aspirations, and their sway over the terrestrial or animal passions in him. So that man is in essence a divine being has also been the central thought behind all the ancient world religions and world philosophies. But it hasn't been presented and proved to the West in such an accurate and logical and consistent whole, and demonstrated and shown also by people that already reached unity in some degree with their inner God, their inner divinity, as it has been since 1875. So to sum up, you might say the core of HPB's message can be regarded as this fundamental unity of all that is and the path to realization thereof. Or in other words, the unification with the divine that we are in the heart of our being. So now the question, if it is true that HPB was a messenger of truth, so how are we sure that was the case? So from the foregoing we can conclude that this, of course, depends on our own state of consciousness. And it is for this reason that also in the first fundamental proposition, a reference is made to the Mandukya Upanishad, in which also several states of consciousness are mentioned. And according to our states of consciousness or levels of understanding, we can also identify these three levels to grasp the truth, which we already presented yesterday: belief, confidence, and unity. And it could apply to the message of HPB, or any other messenger of the Theosophia, or just any other person stating that something is true. So if one bases one's understanding of a message just on account of the authority of others, without consciously thinking it through or properly investigating it oneself, we speak of belief or faith. And truth is then placed outside oneself. It is just judging on the outer appearances. So like accepting the message of a politician because of his charisma, convincing way of speaking, or charming behavior. And unfortunately, this passive level of accepting truth is still quite common. Not only in the outer religions, but also, like I said, in politics or simply in sales. And there are so many examples of injustices being done on a large scale by people that followed others by blind faith that, well, I don't need to mention any examples. So in the Key to Theosophy, H.P. Blavatsky writes about faith that is a word that is not to be found in any theosophical dictionary. And she even calls it intellectual suicide, as we will show later. And this does not mean to say that you should not trust others. The question is only based on what. So now beyond belief there is the level of confidence. We can build up a growing confidence in a statement or message on the way to grasp truth directly, as in the level of unity. By using our faculty of thinking self-consciously and independently, we can take a truth as a hypothesis, test parts of it, see if it's logical and consistent with other things we have experienced as facts, and also discover its value in the practice of life. And it's not without reason that the three fundamental pillars of the Theosophia are presented as propositions. So they are meant to be regarded as such, being always to be proved and checked for their universality. And one must not think lightly about this. I think our whole society is based on assumptions or hypotheses, a lot of which are questionable. I think of the idea, or rather the illusion of possession, something like to own something. Is that possible if we see it from unity or the boundless? Or the illusion of borders or bounds anywhere in time and space. Or maybe even worse, the idea of man as a selfish being. So selecting the right assumptions to base one's vision on life on is a very important step towards realizing an ideal as universal brotherhood. The fundamental unity of all existence proves to be the most universal, ethical, and logical hypothesis it has, and I think it will. So this confidence is built up in several phases. And the first, of course, is being open to new truth. As the one truth is boundless, there are always new perspectives to be found that can add to it and make it clearer. It is like counting the sides of a globe. The number of perspectives are endless. This also means it will never be possible, as I said before, to grasp it in fixed definition or dogmas. And also any prejudice or skepticism must be overcome to confide in a new truth. You need an unselfish attitude that prevents us from denials of those truths that might at first sight conflict with our personal interest. So this doesn't mean that losing all that you have learned as being true and valuable in a logical and ethical sense. Paradoxically as it may sound, being open to a new truth requires you to lift yourself up above the highest and broadest vision that you can think of. We already talked about the importance of selecting the right assumption, not just any assumption. You have to go beyond the knowledge you already have. And this is what is meant, I think, with the wisest is he that knows that he doesn't know. Because the more one knows about the things that are still unknown. It is like a discovery. The more we discover new space, the bigger also the boundaries to go beyond that what you have already discovered to find even more. So we go from universals to particulars. And as with an exploration, the following phase is to define the most important ways or fields to investigate further. New ways or fields that might connect together later. So in this step, we go from the total overview to overseeing the key parts, like the chapters in a book or the organs in a body. And then the next phase is to investigate and experience for oneself if something is true step by step. And you might regard this as the scientific level of gaining confidence. And if it isn't possible to investigate a truth in its entirety, parts of a truth can be checked like this. You might say, try this at home. So think again of the beautiful quote we also saw yesterday from HPB from ISIS of Unveiled. Tell one who had never seen water about the ocean, but let one drop fall upon his hand, and he can then infer from that further that there must exist an ocean of this, an ocean of the eternal wisdom, what is obviously the metaphor. So for most of the theosophical doctrines, it applies that we as average human beings cannot check their value in their entirety. But by checking parts of it, we can build up a growing confidence in them. And think, for instance, of the illusory nature of matter as discovered in the field of quantum mechanics, thereby corroborating HPB's writings from years before. So the last phase of this growing confidence is to see if the separate checked parts of a truth still form one logical and consistent whole, and if they do not contradict each other. And you might call this the philosophical level of gaining confidence, about which HPB wrote, "It is only by means of the philosophy that an intelligent and educated man can avoid the intellectual suicide," there it is, "of believing on blind faith. And it is only by assimilating the strict continuity and logical coherence of the Eastern, if not esoteric doctrines, that he can realize their truth." Well, this phase in particular lends itself for cooperation, for joint study. In cooperation, one can create and uphold a spiritual atmosphere far more easily. One can strengthen focus and add perspectives for a broader and quicker understanding. So to cite HPB once more, she says, "Union is strength and harmony, and well-regulated simultaneous efforts produce wonders. And this has been the secret of all associations and communities since mankind existed." So why do I put so much emphasis on this level of confidence? I think this level of understanding or grasping theosophical teachings is necessary for most of us human beings, as we haven't yet reached the higher states of consciousness. We have not yet reached the unification with the inner God in a more or less degree, as the messengers of the Theosophy had, the masters of the Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion and their chelas. So grasping the truth by growing confidence is for us a very important way, especially here at ITC. Then the highest level of grasping truth is, of course, the ideal, the essence of HPB's message that we mentioned just before. And this level can be regarded as religious, in the original meaning of the word religare, to consciously unify with the divine in oneself. And all the founders of world religions had reached unification with their inner God in a more or less degree, and pointed to unity as the core of their teachings. It is the level of truth that can be experienced by blending the perceiver with the perceived, so to say. So we speak of unity itself. And this can only be experienced by becoming it. It is the way to find reality by giving up oneself with a small case to find oneself with a capital S, to become one with the inner divinity, something that goes far beyond direct perception with our outer senses. In the words of Plotinus, it is the liberation of the mind from its finite consciousness, becoming one and identified with the infinite. And of course, any realization of unity will always be relative, as there are no final destinations in the boundless, as we already concluded. So let us never crystallize our thought by putting an end somewhere. But is this idea of knowledge by experience of unity too far away? Well, let me end with this. You might say H.P. Blavatsky was a messenger of truth and taught us also how to grasp it. But I think in a more specific and applied way, you can also say she taught compassion and how to practice it. Because truth is not something outside of us. Truth is constantly realized by all beings composing nature with their essentially divine free will. So reality is what we make of it. And as compassion is the habit of the divine, that which identifies with all that is, with the one unity, it is the law of laws ruling nature, as Theosophy teaches. So the law of laws, compassion, the divine habit, and the Theosophia, the self-conscious wisdom of the gods, they are one. You might call it the divine practice and theory that go hand in hand. So, and as we are, in our heart, the divine, we can also follow that habit here and now. We can practice compassion according to the widest and noblest vision of ourselves. By fulfilling our duties in a spirit of self-forgetfulness, we are already expressing unity on our level. We are an instrument or vehicle for the Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion, and we are united in the hierarchy of compassion. We are working with nature. And we have H.P. Blavatsky's life as a perfect example for this. So how to grasp the essence of her message, how to realize unity? I think we can do it already here and now by realizing first who we are, divine in essence, secondly, where we come from, the heart of the universe, and thirdly, by fulfilling why we are here, realizing universal brotherhood, following the habit of our inner God, practicing compassion. Thank you for your attention.
So, Erwin, thank you very much for your very well-structured and clear presentation. So, I guess we got it, right? So, how to grasp the essence of our timeless message. We can do it now, right? Our next speaker is somebody who has many